US Army versus Russian Army. Who's stronger? Welcome to the channel, everybody. Today, we're diving into a topic that's had people debating for decades. The US Army versus the Russian Army. It's a real clash of the titans, man. We're talking two of the most powerful military forces on the planet, each with their own unique strengths and strategies. On one side, you've got the US Army, known for its cutting-edge technology, air superiority, and global reach. On the other side, you've got the Russian Army, with its sheer size, history of resilience, and formidable ground forces. It's a complex issue with a lot of factors to consider. So we're gonna break it all down, analyze the strengths and weaknesses of each army, and try to answer the question, who would win in a head-to-head matchup? Buckle up, folks, because this is gonna be a wild ride. Size and structure, a tale of two armies. First off, let's talk numbers. The US Army boasts a force of around 1.3 million active duty personnel, with a reserve force almost as large. That's a lot of boots on the ground. But hold on, because the Russian Army dwarfs that number with over 2.8 million active and reserve personnel. They've got a massive manpower pool, man. But it's not just about the numbers, is it? The US Army is structured around a highly mobile, technologically advanced force with a heavy emphasis on air power and rapid deployment. They're all about speed, precision, and hitting hard and fast. The Russian Army, on the other hand, has a more traditional structure, with a strong emphasis on ground forces and artillery. They're known for their heavy firepower and their ability to absorb and dish out punishment. It's a real meat grinder approach. And let's not forget about the reserves. The US Army National Guard and Reserve play a crucial role in augmenting the active force, providing additional manpower and specialized skills. Similarly, the Russian ground forces rely heavily on their reserve formations, which can be mobilized in times of conflict. Now, some folks might say that size isn't everything, and they'd have a point. The US Army's focus on technology gives them a qualitative edge. They've got advanced tanks like the Abrams, stealth fighters like the F-35, and a global network of bases and allies. But the Russians have been catching up in recent years, modernizing their equipment and developing some seriously impressive hardware of their own. They've got the T-14 Armata tank, the Su-57 fighter jet, and a whole arsenal of hypersonic missiles that have got the Pentagon sweating. Technological advancements, a new arms race? Let's be real, folks, technology is a game changer on the battlefield, and when it comes to cutting-edge military tech, the US has historically held the upper hand. We're talking about precision-guided munitions, stealth technology, and a level of digital integration that's light years ahead of most countries. The US Army's investment in research and development has given them a significant advantage in areas like drone warfare, cyber warfare, and missile defense. They've got drones like the Reaper and Predator that can carry out airstrikes with pinpoint accuracy, and their cyber capabilities are nothing short of formidable. But don't count the Russians out just yet. They've been pouring resources into their own military modernization program, and they've made some serious strides. They've got some scary good electronic warfare systems that can disrupt enemy communications and radar, and their hypersonic missiles are a real game changer. Remember that whole thing about the US having stealth technology? Well, Russia's been developing advanced radar systems that can supposedly detect even the stealthiest aircraft. And they're working on their own hypersonic missiles that can travel at multiple times the speed of sound, making them incredibly difficult to intercept. Plus, the Russians have a knack for reverse engineering. They've been known to take American technology, figure out how it works, and then create their own versions. It's like a real-life arms race out there, man. And it's not just about the big-ticket items like tanks and fighter jets. The US Army has been investing heavily in soldier systems like advanced body armor, night vision goggles, and communication gear. They're constantly looking for ways to give their troops an edge on the battlefield. Meanwhile, the Russians have been focusing on developing weapon systems that can counter US technological superiority. They've invested heavily in electronic warfare, anti-aircraft systems, and long-range precision-guided munitions. It's a constant game of cat and mouse, with each side trying to outmaneuver the other. You can have all the fancy tech in the world, but it's useless without well-trained soldiers who know how to use it. And that's where things get really interesting. The US Army puts a huge emphasis on training and professional development. They've got some of the most advanced training facilities in the world, and their soldiers go through rigorous exercises designed to simulate real-world combat scenarios. They're constantly training, constantly evaluating, and constantly trying to improve their skills. The Russians, on the other hand, have a different approach. They still value training, but they also place a high premium on experience. They've been involved in numerous conflicts in recent years, from Chechnya to Syria, and their soldiers have seen a lot of action. That real-world experience is invaluable. It gives them a certain edge, a certain grit that you can't replicate in a training simulation. They've learned how to fight in tough environments, how to adapt to changing circumstances, and how to operate under pressure. But it's not just about combat experience. The Russians also have a long tradition of military service with a strong emphasis on discipline, patriotism, and loyalty. They're taught to endure hardship, to follow orders without question, and to fight for their motherland. The U.S. Army, with its focus on individual initiative and critical thinking, has a different approach to leadership and decision-making. They empower their soldiers to make decisions on the ground, which can be a real advantage in a rapidly changing battlefield. So, who has the edge in terms of training and readiness? It's a tough call. The U.S. Army's technological prowess and rigorous training programs are undeniable, but the Russian Army's combat experience and deep military tradition should not be underestimated. Let's talk money, folks. Because when it comes to building a powerful military, money talks. And the U.S. Army has a lot of it. In fact, the U.S. spends more on its military than any other country in the world, with a defense budget of over $700 billion. That's more than the next 10 countries combined. That kind of money buys you a lot of firepower, a lot of research and development, and a lot of global influence. The Russian military budget, while still substantial, pales in comparison at around $60 billion. That's a significant difference, and it means that the Russians have to be more strategic with their spending. They can't afford to waste money on unnecessary programs or outdated equipment. But here's the thing, the Russians have a knack for doing a lot with a little. They're masters of improvisation, and they've learned how to stretch a ruble further than you'd think possible. They've got a history of developing effective weapon systems at a fraction of the cost of their U.S. counterparts. Plus, the Russians have a geographic advantage. They've got a vast landmass to defend, which means that they don't necessarily need to project power globally in the same way that the U.S. does. They can focus their resources on defending their own borders and their sphere of influence. And let's not forget about the human factor. The Russians have a large pool of manpower to draw from, and their soldiers are generally paid less than their U.S. counterparts. That means they can field a larger army at a lower cost. Alright folks, let's talk about global reach. The U.S. Army has a network of military bases and alliances that spans the globe. They've got troops stationed in over 150 countries, and they can project power to virtually any corner of the world. This global presence gives them a significant strategic advantage. They can respond to crises quickly, they can support their allies, and they can deter their adversaries. It's like having a giant web of influence that stretches across the planet. The Russians, while not having the same global reach as the U.S., have been working on expanding their own influence. They've been strengthening ties with countries like China, India, and Iran, and they've been more assertive in regions like the Middle East and Eastern Europe. They've also been investing heavily in their navy, which has traditionally been the weaker branch of their military. They're building new warships, developing new capabilities, and conducting more exercises in key maritime choke points. They're sending a clear message: they're back, baby, and they're ready to play on the world stage. And let's not forget about soft power. The U.S. has a long history of cultural influence, with its movies, music, and brands being popular all over the world. This cultural influence can translate into political and economic leverage, giving them an edge in negotiations and international forums. The Russians have their own cultural strengths, with a rich history of literature, music, and art. They've also been more active in recent years in using propaganda and disinformation to influence public opinion abroad. It's a whole different kind of warfare, man. Well, there you have it, folks. We've looked at the size, the tech, the training, the budget, and the global influence of both the U.S. and Russian armies. And the answer to the question of who's stronger is, it's complicated. There's no easy answer, no clear-cut winner. Both armies have their strengths and weaknesses, and any real-world conflict between them would be brutal and unpredictable. It would depend on a whole host of factors, from the terrain to the political climate to the element of surprise. Ultimately, it's a question that might never have a definitive answer. But one thing's for sure, both the U.S. and Russian armies are forces to be reckoned with, and the world watches with bated breath as these two titans circle each other on the global stage. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more in-depth analyses. Let us know in the comments who you think is stronger.